Hello and welcome back to Joe's Math Tools. In our session today, we are applying the distributive property in part 12. And in this session, we're distributing a negative term into our parentheses. And if you're ready to see how this is going to be done, let's get started. So in our session today, we are distributing a negative term into our parentheses. And remember that when we are distributing a term into our parentheses, that means the entire term is multiplied to everything within our brackets. So our -2 will be multiplied to 3. So we have -2 times 3. And then our -2 will also be multiplied to our t. So in this session, because we are distributing a negative term, that means we will also be applying our rules for integers. Now, when a -2 is multiplied to a 3, and our 3 in this case is positive, remember that a negative times a positive equals to a negative answer. And then we will just multiply our numbers as usual, where 2 times 3 is equal to 6. And now for our next parentheses where we have a -2 being multiplied to t, again, the same rule will apply because our 2 is negative and our t is positive. The answer is going to be in negative. And remember that because both t and 2 are unlike terms, we're simply going to combine those terms together. And remember that when our term is written in this format with 2t, it means the same thing as 2 times t. And now for our final step. Because we have two signs following each other, meaning we have a plus and then we have our negative, we are still going to be applying our rules for integers at this point, where we will be multiplying these two terms together, where a positive times a negative will equal to a negative, which means that I will now replace the two signs with a single sign and write back everything else within my equation. And just a little side note to stick in here. I know that in most cases, a lot of students get caught up on trying to figure out whether, in this case, because we have the sign in the middle of the 6 and the 2, whether it is a minus sign or a negative sign. Remember that when your sign is written within your expression, yes, we will read this as -6 minus 2t. However, remember that when we're reading each term individually, meaning that when I'm reading -6, I will read this as -6. But in my expression, if I was to remove the -6 and we were just given to the minus and the 2t, we will not read this as -2t. We will read this as -2t. So remember that your term always takes the sign that is in front of it. But when it's written in the form of an expression that we have here, we will read it as -6 minus 2t. But if we look at each of the terms individually, we will read our 6 as -6 and we will read our 2 as -2t. Okay, so just keep that in mind as you are working through your questions with integers, and try not to get caught up all the time on trying to figure out whether the sign in front is a negative or a minus. Okay, so as always, get some additional practice in, and I'll see you right here in the next session on Joe's Math Tools, where the aim is always to make math easy.